Thank you all for coming out. This is an important conversation. If you've read our brochures, if you've gone on our website, Better Outcomes for Our Kids was founded for one reason only, was to start an authentic conversation with our community about public education. Far too long have we stood on the sidelines and watched our kids fail. Far too long have we put ourselves in a position of saying, what can I do, as if we don't know what we can do. You know, we are here to invigorate, educate, and teach communities how to advocate. And so this is part of our work. Let it be known and let it be clear that Book does not have a position on OSD. We are a 501c3, but we see ourselves as a community platform and leadership to be able to create a dialogue, not to tell you what to do either way, but to provide an opportunity for you to hear this type of conversation. Far too long we're told to do stuff and we're not able to make decisions on our own. But I believe as a community, this is the start of saying we're going to have a proactive approach to understanding when we touch that glass, we're not just reading the language. We've had the opportunity where we've been able to go and find the information and do what's best for our community, our family, what's going on at our kitchen table. So I want to thank you all for coming out.
Ebenezer, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his spiritual home, okay, the civil rights icon. Then we have Friendship, 153 years. In the basement, Spelman College was founded. So we've got two historic churches. We've got two movements coming out of these churches. You got your civil rights movement, you got your education movement. How fitting is it that we now have these two gentlemen, these two leaders, facilitate this love movement?
Thank you so much to my good friend David Mitchell and Morehouse brother for his visionary leadership, and to Kelly Boone Baycoat. Thank you so much for your leadership and for this opportunity. And thanks to all the clergy who are here and all of us who are here for this important conversation. I just want to echo what Kelly has already said. At the end of the day, we're here for our children. And after the vote on November 8th, one thing that we ought to be very clear about is that while we have to answer this question won't be the answer. Did you hear what I said? We've got to answer this question, but this question is not the answer. That vote yes or no, nothing miraculous is going to happen for our children on November 9th. We've got work to do. Either way, we've got to be engaged in this issue. And so I'll let Dr. Will speak, but when they asked me to moderate this, I said, of course I will, because this is a very important conversation. It's not going away. It's not going away. Whatever the vote is, however it goes, it's not going away.
Yes. Good morning, my sisters and brothers in Christ. Delighted to be here today, and to Dr. Warnock, real privilege to have this opportunity to facilitate this conversation with him. As many of you know, I'm a bit of a novice to the community, relocated to the city of Atlanta from Hampton, Virginia, last October. But as is the case, you know, there are issues in every city that we find ourselves, and many of the issues revolve around the question of education. I'm grateful to David Mitchell and Kelly Baycoat Boone for the opportunity to entertain this conversation with you. I shared with them, my wife of some 31 years has taught kindergarten. She's been my window to this arena, and so I understand how critical this conversation is.
Shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended to allow the state to intervene in chronically failing public schools in order to improve student performance? Now, if you're seeing that question for the first time in the ballot booth, you don't know anything. So can you tell us what this actually looks like, again, from your perspective, because someone else is coming from the other side, and I think they'll explain it differently.
And see, the word intervene is what's very misleading in this, because it's not about intervening. It really is about taking over. But you have to read deeper into it and see what what they know is that you don't read, people aren't going to read deeper. They're just going to see this question and they're going to vote. But when you go into the enabling legislation, it really is taking over local schools. And if you would allow me to, pastors, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to set the stage and then I'm going to bring us to where we are right now. In 2012, we had a constitutional amendment about charter schools. And I want to be clear, I'm not opposed to charter schools. So this isn't about this. This is about the constitutionality and when we choose to change our constitution in this state and what we base those changes on. Because see, the Constitution should be a little bit more sacred than to just change it on things that aren't proven practices. But we did. We changed our Constitution. But when we changed the Constitution back then, it was approved to have another authorizer, but that additional authorizer did not have the ability, the governor didn't have the ability to channel dollars to the public schools. And there wasn't a way to get facilities. This constitutional amendment, as it is written, when you read the enabling legislation, provides the manner or a way legally for the governor to be able to provide funding and facilities to charter schools that are under the control and auspices of our public education system.
It's not a takeover. As a former person that ran the Democratic caucus for California, and I ran the Republican caucus for California, I know how to give you talking points and wedge issues to get you so excited that, hey, you know what? That's a scary big boogeyman in the house. But let me tell you something. The key word is intervention. You will not go to a restaurant that serve a 60.1 of service. And 90% of the time, the people that's coming around and telling our people to vote no on this don't look like us. I heard some things saying that, okay, the people that are appointed on the commission, the lieutenant governor appoints on that commission, other legislators appoints on that commission. It's not just the governor appointing. How do I know that? I'm one of the charter school commissioners. The same way with the Board of Education. Not every one of them are appointed solely by the governor. That's a conflict of interest. Our laws don't allow that to happen. And the reason why I can go into rooms and walk into rooms and say that is because we are not involved.
We are being asked to change our constitution of the state of Georgia based on faulty data and criteria. The CCRPI is the document, is the metrics by which they use to change, they're saying a system is scoring 60 or below. The CCRPI was never developed to measure whether or not a school was failing or passing. It was not developed to do that. The CCRPI was developed to measure growth. It was developed to see if children were growing. The CCRPI is a metrics that has a lot of different weights that come into play. And ever since the CCRPI has been, oh, I'm sorry, the criterion reference test. It is a test that allows for, that you put in place, and it has changed every year. What that test does is allows for you to look at how much a child has grown. It measures in it how many days a child attends school. It measures in it how many, it has a whole host of measures that really do. They've changed every year since it's been in place. So the CCRPI has been changing since day one, thank you very much, has been changing since day one. What you have to know that nowhere in the legislation that they have put in place is there a score that says 60 is the score. Nowhere in the legislation for this does it say that after 3 years or a maximum of 10 years that it has to go back to the local public school. It doesn't say it in the enabling legislation. So the enabling legislation and the question that's on the ballot are totally, it's very misleading because it's not the same thing. When you dig deeper and you look in it, there's no definition in the enabling legislation of failing schools. That's what I mean when I say there is no score in there. The score is 60 today, it could be 70 tomorrow, it could be 80 next year, it could be 90. Whatever the governor determines that they want that score to be.
CCR, PRI, it's not fair. You can take every school on this list and give them 20 points. Let's say their argument is right. Give them 20 points. They still wouldn't make an F. Some of them still would not make an F. We have to ask ourselves a question as religious leaders in our communities. What's the future of our churches when our children can't read? When I got involved in this, I came to Georgia 16 years ago. I was youth pastor of a mega church. 800 kids in my youth program. Had good qualified teachers. But I got children that could not read NIV, Message, or any other translation of the Bible. So I was compelled to go outside the walls and start my own nonprofit called Stone Academy. And it's been running for 15 years, helping kids in the Bibb County, Middle Georgia area, teaching them how to read and write. And then I looked at what they call local control. I looked at the local school district where their budget is 3 times larger than the city's budget. And I looked at all the people that's getting elected on that local city, that local school board. And most of them that was on that board did not live or had their kids in that school. You know why? Because if that budget is 3 times larger than the city's budget, they're no longer on that board for our children. They're on that board for contracts. APS, their board they have a $1 billion budget. They got 21 schools on this list. DeKalb is the hub for sexual trafficking, not for Georgia, but for the country. And I know tons of brothers that have churches on Flat Shores that live in that area. They're good friends of mine. We talk about it all the time. Our children are dropping out of school, working on the streets. Know why business is not coming to our community? They chase an educated workforce. And my sister, right, most of these schools are in predominantly African-American communities. She's right about that. The mayor of Augusta is trying to get his superintendent to be proactive and do something else and create what they call educational zones to target the schools that are on this list. You know how many you have on this list in Augusta? 21. Chatham County, down in Savannah, sends more children to the Juvenile Justice Department for incarceration than Bibb County, than Fulton County. They're number 3 in the entire state because of the dropout rate. So we sit and we hear these things and say, hey, you know, don't interfere with the Constitution. I get all that. We're going to have children that can't read the Constitution.
I want to ask a very direct question.
Yes, sir.
What will this look like? If this thing passes, what will we see?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly.
And I'm very interested in this question. I'm from Chatham County.
I know.
And I grew up, one of the things that I've witnessed in Chatham County, I don't want to oversimplify this issue, but I graduated from high school in 1987. I went to a school, I got an excellent public school education that prepared me well. It was a very integrated public school. One of the things that's happened in Chatham County is in the years since I've left, they managed to resegregate the schools. I mean, it's unbelievable. My school was about 60-40. Now it's all black. And, you know, they said they were doing magnet programs and all of this stuff, but they basically resegregated all the schools. And one of the questions I'd like for you and Valerie to engage, I don't think we can talk about much of anything in America without dealing with this issue of race, and whether or not we might have better outcomes if we could better integrate our schools both in terms of race and class. But the number one, the question I want you to respond to now is really what will happen? What is it? We know that it's
Right.
I think we all agree that the status quo is a problem, that we're not happy with where our kids are, that we need better outcomes for our kids. But what would this look like?
If it passes, and even if it don't passes, there's going to be a lot of push to do something. This has been the most exciting issue I've seen in a long time in the state of Georgia. But if it passes, 20 schools will be designated. Now, here's what we have. We have 127 on this list, but there's another 137 that's on probation. That is one grade away from being on that list. So 20 schools out of this 127 will be identified. Now, that could look like several ways. It could say, you know what, we're just going to go in Augusta. It could say we're going to take the 12 in Macon, or it says we're going to take the 3 that's been failing for 16 years in Macon County. Or we can take some from DeKalb, some from Fulton, or spread them around the state, and then you will have a superintendent who is appointed, right? And that superintendent will start working with those local schools that's been identified and will create a board. Let's say this is one school, that's one school, that's one school. Then that board would be a community folks and parents would sit on that board and determine what type of education is best for their kids, where the money go and how much money goes into the classroom. They will get 3% for administrative costs.
Now, it could change. A 3% fee that you have to pay off the top, plus the dollars that leaves when the schools go. And that 3% is set. It can be changed at any time. When people say local control, most people think about your local Board of Education. I can say this, I was a board member, I'm head of the Georgia School Boards Association. I fear is people will be so upset with their local boards of education because of either something that happened personally to them or something that they assumed happened or something that they were told that happened, and they don't focus on the long-term effects or impacts of this change.
The other thing is when we say local control, you will have a superintendent appointed by the governor. That scares a lot of folks. It scares about whether or not who's going to be in the governor. It scares a lot of folks. But you have those parents and those local people on the board holding them accountable. Currently, right now, most of our parents can't hold the local school board accountable because when you're working, they have a 3-minute where you can come up and speak in 3 minutes and that's it. Most of our parents can't even get into our schools. This is allowing the parents and community folks to be in charge of the education. They chose IE Squared because they did not want to have local parents and community folks be on those boards because every school would have their own board.
I'm going to ask you one last question, then I'm going to go to the audience, so I'm sure my colleagues have some questions. Can you give me an example of a state or a place where this is working? That if you say, well, this is the reason why we should do it, and this is where it's working, what would you lift up as your example? Do you, because Valerie clearly thinks Louisiana is not working. Do you think Louisiana is working?
I do, and I can tell you why, and I'm based it on facts. I'm a member of Black Education Alliance, which is called BAEO. It's educated black folks all across the country that's fighting for education for black folks. I had an opportunity to go to Louisiana and some other organizations went to Louisiana, and we spent some time down there. If you look at the numbers of where those kids were and where they are now, 17% graduation rates to now 53% graduation, Georgia's still at 55. And we know that if a child do not graduate 9 times out of 10, they will stay in there. Is this a silver bullet for our state? Absolutely not. But we gotta give our children some type of option. The other option is to stay there and don't do nothing. I disagree with that. If you look at the gains that Louisiana have had, they have made gains where those children are now going to college. And my sister's right, now they're turning them back over. When the school turns around, they go back to their local school district.
Now in New Orleans, one of the things that folk talked about, and I think I didn't say this when I got started because I was a little taken off, but let me just say this. We're not saying that there isn't a problem. There is a problem of performance. What we don't agree on is the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem that is being proposed to us is a solution that comes from states that score below us currently on all national assessments. We went and selected a model that has not been successful at all. It's had some mixed results in some places, but even with the mixed results, those results haven't been higher than traditional schools. They've scored about the same level. Now, they said this is the model of Louisiana. Well, let's be clear. The children in Katrina, who they started working on this for, those children were gone by the time the Louisiana Recovery District came. It was another group of children that was there. Now, some of them were still there, but a lot of those children got displaced. Now, that system has failed, and right now they're working on turning it back over to the traditional public school systems. I talk to the executive director for the Louisiana School Boards Association almost every day because he sees what we're going through here.
Thank you so much. Two very different perspectives on the same question, and that was the purpose of the conversation. The Reverend Timothy McDonald is dying to ask a question, pastor of First Iconium Baptist Church.
Thank you, Pastor Warnock. Thank you to our presenters, Wills, and thank Book for having this forum today. Can you explain to me a little bit more your day job?
I can explain my day
Not
job,
me.
and that's very important. Everywhere I go, I get people say, you know, he'll sell out. He shouldn't be doing this. He gets paid to do this. Let's get the record clear and have full transparency. I don't lobby. I don't get paid, nor do I get paid to do this. I'm inside the prisons as I work for the Department of Community Supervision. I'm on my lunch break here today. When my sister called me, I was already working. I traveled the state. I did the same thing with the Constitution Amendment for charter schools, and some of those same arguments that you said, that it's going to be a disaster. All these companies are going to come in here and run our schools for profit. Well, let me tell you this here. I sit on the Charter School Commission, and not one company has come in this state that we have allowed to make a profit on our kids in this state. You know why? Because I vote them down.
In Louisiana, with the for-profit management companies that came in, there were so many egregious kind of, so much fraud that went on. They put in their law a clause that did not allow, that kind of was a safeguard for the fraud that took place. Legislators in the state of Georgia tried to get that put in the law here, or the proposed law here, and they didn't allow it to get put in. So we don't have a safeguard for us here in the state of Georgia should this amendment pass.
There's a question. There's a question. Yeah, and I want you. There's a question lodged in that, and it was.
Yeah.
And this is great. First of all, I want us to think about. I mean, this is a great moment. I don't know how many times I've been in a room with us, you know, arguing about this. So I want us to just acknowledge we don't have to agree. This is a great moment. This is what we need to be arguing about.
Yes.
So, but this is an important question. And Valerie spoke to it, and you weren't here. So I'd like for you to speak directly to it. You said that these schools can't reach a 60.
Right.
Their argument is that as the legislation is currently written, they might reach 60, and that still may not be enough because the threshold is not clarified in the legislation. It could be 70, it could be 80, depending on what political outcome, is that correctly framed? Depending on what outcome somebody wants. Could you speak to that question?
I will. Everyone, they say they don't want to be graded on this system, don't want to be graded on the student office achievement scores. They don't want to be graded. We grade everything else. Even your credit gets graded. We grade everything. But here's where I fall down on. I fall down on this school right here. elementary school, and for the last 3 years here in Georgia, this elementary school, 34.7, 37.0, and a 41.9. I give them 20 points. They still won't make an F. In order to get off this list, all you have to do is make a 60.1. I submit to you that's too low. Why do we got to be lowering the bar for our kids in this state? Is there different points of opinion on this? Absolutely. Is this an emotional issue? Absolutely. But I asked the question, where was the other side 3 years ago when these kids was making a 38? Because we know in elementary, if a child can't read by third grade level, they're going up into the prisons. I'm seeing them. I'm seeing them every day. That's my daytime job, and that's how I stand on it. For me, it's not about adults. I'll argue with an adult all day long, but this is why I'm arguing about it.
I hear your argument, but so you concede the fact that the bar could move. It's not clearly defined in the legislation.
The bar could move.
They could have defined.
Right, the bar could move. You keep in mind every year, the people that walks the halls, the lobbyists, the people that get paid to walk the halls for the other side, every year they look for a different way of saying, hey, grade us on this, grade us on that, grade us on this. If a school gets off that, if a school makes the grade letter 60.1, they can go back to their local school district if that board makes that says so. It is an enabling legislation.
If
Me? A local board is a board that's appointed for that local school.
by the OSD, and if that board says it can go back, then it can. But the
Right.
board doesn't have to say that.
They don't have to say that.
Exactly.
They can say they want to go to a charter system.
Okay.
They can stay the same status quo. Give an example. If I had a school that's now all of a sudden making good grades, right? And for me to go back, why would I want to go back? I understand the fear of that. But why would I want to go back to failure?
It's also important to understand that after 10 years, it won't even be the same children in that building. The state has a statute on the book, A+ reform. You can Google it. The state has it. They approved it, where you create priority and focus schools. In those schools, that's when you go into a district and you focus specifically those low-performing schools to move the needle. Superintendents across the state are telling me how these children are growing and the successes that they are having on their CCRPIs as a result of that. So we've got that. We've also got in place, and let's be clear, Plus reform is a law that got passed, I think it was by Governor Perdue. It got passed. The state of Georgia has never fully implemented every piece of that reform, A+ reform. It's never fully done it. We have the ability, if they would enforce the laws, if they would give the state school superintendent the power to go in and to truly enforce every piece of that law, we could see the needle move. There is no need to do a state constitutional amendment to move the needle on student achievement. Right now, every school district, he said it, had to choose a flexibility plan. We don't even know. In that flexibility plan, they've got to say how they intend to address low-performing schools. Every district has to do that. I wish that I could stand here and tell you all that every child, by the time they're in 3rd grade, is reading on level. I wish I could tell you that. We don't teach our communities and work along with our communities and recognize the intersectionality. Guys, crime is not a result. Crime and people dropping out of school, that's not a result. That's not just the education, that's the community that these children grow up in. Let's be clear about that. That's the community that they grow up in. When you have a state legislature that tells children and parents that their children can drop out of school legally at 16 years old, what are we fostering? What are we fostering when we tell kids that they could drop out?
That's good. We thank Valerie Wilson and Pastor Loudon once again for joining us.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of my colleagues, the clergy, for being here. I think this is an important and passionate conversation. We're here because we're very interested. Many of our congregations look to us as they try to think through these issues. And you know, we are called upon to preach about them and to engage them in various kinds of ways. So thank you so much. I want to thank Better Outcomes for Our Kids, led by my brother David Mitchell and Kelly Baycoat for pulling us together. Give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.